Hey, what is up guys, MKBHD here, and this is the Nexus 5. This is easily one of the most anticipated phones of this whole year, and now it's here. Now it's official, and this is the full review. So we'll start off with the design. So this one comes in black or white, and a 16 or 32 gigabyte model. I chose the 32 gig white. I'm calling it the Stormtrooper phone, others are calling it the Panda phone, but I like it. I think the design is pretty classy, pretty clean and neat. I did a full video actually on all the differences between the black and white model, so that'll be the first video link right below that like button. But the only thing I found since that video is that this white Nexus 5 is really not actually pure white. It's actually more of a shale or off-white color to prevent it from getting noticeably dirty very quickly, and that works. But the Nexus 5 has a very understated design, like some other Google hardware. LG manufactures this guy, but it looks almost nothing like the LG G2 that it's technically based off of. It has a soft touch finish on the back, and it's totally flat, like very little curve until you get to the outside edges, and then there's a camera bump. But one thing that really strikes you when you're holding the Nexus 5 is just how light it feels in the hand. When you first pick it up out the box, it feels unreasonably light, but it's only 130 grams, so way lighter than the Nexus 4 and the HTC One that's made of metal. It's actually the same weight as the Galaxy S4, but it still feels more solid in the hand because of that soft touch finish on the back, the rubberized back, and although this white one does have some glossy plastic on the sides. But in the words of Matthias Duarte, this is hardcore plastic. No, seriously, he actually said that. Either way, the rest of the Nexus 5 design is pretty solid. The buttons are really nice and clickier and more tactile than most other phones. That screams quality. And speaking of quality, another thing about this phone that's impressive is the display, and rightfully so. It's a 5-inch 1080p display, and it's incredibly sharp, as you'd expect, with 441 pixels per inch. And it's an LCD display, so it's super high brightness in daylight, viewable from a ton of angles, and overall a very accurate, pleasing display to the eye. The only possible complaint I could have about this panel are the contrast ratio. Sometimes it looks a little bit washed out, and the fact that I could see the LCD panel's backlight when holding the phone at an angle. I don't know if I just got too used to AMOLED displays that don't have this problem, or never realized this, but it became a thing that I just kept noticing. But this is hands down a big, beautiful display. It's even accented a bit more by the fact that the navigation bar at the bottom and the notifications up top are transparent, so the display really just dominates a big wall on the front of the phone. Also, another minor thing I noticed, on the white model, the circular earpiece, which is already pretty unique, kind of glows a bit, and every time I pull the phone out of my pocket, especially outside, I kind of half expected that to be the notification light because it's so bright. But it's not. It's just a really bright, constantly glowing white orb in the rest of an otherwise black phone. The actual notification light is multicolor, and it's in the bottom center, just like the Nexus 7's, but I think it would have been awesome if they put the multicolor LED in the earpiece. Oh, and the earpiece on the device and the voice quality are actually pretty good. I actually really like that little accent for the earpiece. But what's not really good is the speaker. Now, when you try to cram the same specs as a high-end $700 phone into a $350 phone, you inevitably have to make some sort of shortcut. And the speaker at the bottom of the Nexus 5 is definitely one of those shortcuts. It is very, 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 very bad for any smartphone. Not only is it firing out of the bottom of the phone, which means sideways audio and landscape, but just like the iPhone 5S, only the left grill is a speaker, and the right grill is just a pretty microphone. So if you accidentally cover just that tiny area with your finger, which I did all the time, you ruin the audio and have to readjust your hand. Easily the most disappointing part of the hardware on the whole Nexus 5 is that speaker. Now, on to something that a lot of other people have been disappointed by in the hardware, is the camera. Alright, now because of a lot of the other high-end internals in this phone, a lot of people are expecting the camera to be high-end as well. It's not. It's another one of those shortcuts that LG had to make to get this device to be just $350 off contract, so it's definitely a conscious decision they made. In fact, this phone shares almost all of the same internals as the LG G2, which is much more expensive off contract, but they use a different camera sensor and totally different optics, so this was a conscious decision that they made to go with this sensor. It's an 8 megapixel sensor behind f2.4 glass with optical image stabilization and an LED flash. Nothing too extreme here. Here's the thing, the photos that it takes are average. I'd say better than the Moto X and the Nexus 4, not as good as the Galaxy Note 3 or Lumia 1020, somewhere in the middle. Average. The outdoor situations and brightly lit scenarios where you'd expect any camera to do well, it does fine. The shots are decent with sharpness and detail, and the colors are accurate, which is nice. Not every smartphone gets the colors right. But in situations where you'd say, hey, it'd be nice to get a really sweet shot here in questionable lighting, don't count on it. Don't count on getting a sweet shot out of the Nexus 5 because it isn't happening. It's just not that high-end a sensor, and it's not up to that task. No shot that you get from the Nexus 5 is going to blow anyone out of the water and make them think, oh wow, you took that with a phone? No way. I mean, it does fine, and the shots that you take are good enough to share on Twitter and really anywhere on the web. But like we said, this isn't going to match the $700 high-end smartphone cameras naturally. It actually does its best. It really shines in low light, no pun intended. Okay, that was totally intended. But low light is one of its strongest points thanks to the optical image stabilization. In fact, I'd say this Nexus 5 takes some of the best low light shots of any smartphone next to the HTC One. I'll have a full gallery of all my sample shots linked in the description below if you want to check out any of those. I think a lot of the reason people aren't as happy with the Nexus 5 camera experience is because it's not fast anymore. It used to be really fast. If you remember when the Galaxy Nexus was introduced, it had instant shutter. You could just fire off photos rapid fire and instant shutter would take care of that all of it for you really fast. The Nexus 5, as far as I can tell, just doesn't have it anymore. There's no instant shutter in this new camera app, and cameras have always been the weakest point of Nexus devices, and this is no exception. The software is pretty slow to open up the camera app, and then once the camera app is open, it's pretty slow to actually take the photo once you've pressed the shutter button, and a lot of times you want to get HDR mode on, and that particular mode takes us a full second or two to actually turn on, and then actually taking an HDR plus photo also takes a full second or so before it processes and you're already ready to take the next shot. So in between shot time is really long. The first time you take a shot, it takes a while to open up the camera and it takes a while to switch between modes. So I would characterize this as a slow camera, and that doesn't give anyone any sort of confidence when taking shots with it. Now, I mentioned in another review video of a recent phone, the Moto X, where the camera was just awful as well. This is on a very, very software level. This could be entirely fixed through a software update. I would encourage Google to push the stock camera app to the Play Store like Motorola did with theirs and make it better through that, because this is really the worst part of the software of this phone. This camera app could use a lot of work. But at least something that I love about the Nexus 5's camera app is the video mode. The optical image stabilization makes for some really smooth video, which is awesome. Focusing is pretty quick. You can take pictures while recording, and the microphone is really good. As you can probably hear, it's easily one of the best in any smartphone I've ever used. And that's LG's fault. So good job, LG. I appreciate the awesome mic. And the video quality is that much better because of it. But of course, this is a Nexus device, so the main focus here, let's be honest, really isn't the hardware, it's most definitely the software. And of course, this is running the latest version of brand new Android 4.4 KitKat. In fact, it's the only device right now on the market running KitKat. And the word I would use to describe KitKat on this phone is clean. That's the word that keeps coming to mind when looking at this new design. In fact, it feels like a very understated, minimal OS for a very clean, minimal, understated phone design. First thing you'll notice is the transparency, and they've removed a lot of the hollow blue accents from Jelly Bean and made those elements pure white. So there's no crazy colors going on here anymore for the most part, except for that settings app, which apparently they forgot to remove the blue from. But the real point here of the new design is to let the apps take center stage, let the Play Stores take center stage, and apps are now the main focus. Even their icons are bigger, and there's a newly adjusted Roboto font, and even this further supported immersion mode, which will encourage apps to take up the full screen and hide the notification bar and the navigation bar. Now, KitKat is way less memory hungry than previous versions of Android. In fact, it lowered the system requirements to half a gig of RAM, so that's not a problem for the Nexus 5. Plus, the Nexus 5 has a Snapdragon 800, 2.3 GHz quad-core processor, and 2 GB of RAM, so performance here is exactly as you would expect. It's buttery. It's very responsive and smooth and silky and whatever other words you want to use to describe the feeling of using stock Android on a high-end device. It's all of that. And that goes for multitasking and switching between open apps, and for launching new apps, and this goes for web browsing and scrolling around in Chrome. It's all very familiar stuff like the Google Play Edition Galaxy S4 and the Google Play Edition HTC One. It performs just like those, which is great. And since Jelly Bean supports Trim, and the newest version of Android supports Trim as well, long story short here is this phone is likely going to perform really well just like this for years to come. But even after knowing all that, you know what's weird? The battery life. I'm surprised by how inconsistent the battery life really was with this Nexus 5. Now, it has a Snapdragon 800 chip, and that's supposed to be a power sipper, and Android 4.4 is supposed to be less memory intensive, and there's supposed to be, new location settings in Android 4.4 to use even less battery, and optimization on a Nexus device should be at an all-time high, and it has a modest-sized 2300 milliamp hour battery, but yet actually could not make it through an entire day on the Nexus 5 battery without recharging at some point during the day. Still haven't done it. And that sucks. I mean, I get up at 7 a.m. and at some point before maybe 5 p.m., the battery will be dead and I have to get it onto a charger. Now it helps that this supports wireless charging, so I can just drop it on an orb anywhere, and it helps that it's actually a quick charger because it's only a 2300 milliamp hour battery, but still, I wish the battery was better. The phone is very slim, it's one of the thinnest out there, and it's already extremely light. I would not have a problem at all if LG had put a larger battery inside and made it a little bit thicker. Bigger phones, even the curved phones out there right now, tend to be a little bit easier to hold than the flat, thin ones. And this is a flat, thin phone, and I would have rather seen a slightly bigger and maybe more curved phone with a bigger battery just to get it through the day at least once. Now, as technically a developer device, I don't even know how much Google would care about the battery life, the camera, and the speaker on the Nexus 5. But at least 2 out of these 3 things could potentially be fixed with an update to Android straight from Google. And it's a Nexus, so you will get that update fast. And I love KitKat already. It's the most advanced version of Android yet. It's the most beautiful version of Android yet. And that makes using the phone an absolute pleasure. And I use my phone all the time. I'm basically a power user, I could say. And if I could find a way to get more than what seems like the maximum of 3 hours of screen on time in one charge, I would be super happy with this phone. But even now, I am definitely satisfied, and I'm moderately happy using what I think is a really sharp, eye-catching device and the best version of Android out there, KitKat. It also has one of the smallest learning curves of any versions of Android. There's more visual cues starting right on the lock screen where they have an up arrow for Google Now and an actual camera icon like iOS 7 that tells you that you can swipe to get into the camera. It's an even better thought out operating system, and you can see much more attention to detail in a lot of places, even if they did forget to take out the hollow blue from the settings. There are still also all kinds of little things in Android 4.4 that you notice after a while. They're like, hey, why does it do that? You know, little quirks like in the Hangouts SMS integration, it has a separate thread for your Hangouts and your SMS from the same person. I feel like it should recognize names and combine those. There's also 2 photo apps in Android 4.4. Not really sure why, if they're planning on merging them or not. I don't know, they're just kind of there. So there's little things like that, but you'll probably end up seeing all of the biggest problems with it fixed in software updates in like 4.4.1 very soon, which you will be seeing immediately if you have a Nexus 5. So the bottom line is this Nexus 5 is the most Google phone that's ever been made. It's some people like to call it pure Android, and as far as we can tell, it still is, but it feels like a Google experience Android, whereas you also have the Samsung experience Android and the HTC and the Sony experience Android. This feels like the Google version of Android, which a lot of people will like. If you're looking for a high-end device with no compromises and all the best specs and on-paper statistics and numbers and things like that, the Nexus 5 is just flat out not for you. You'd be better off with something like the HTC One or the Galaxy Note 3 or the Lumia 1020 or something like that. But if you're looking for the most pure Google experience and you want to be first in line for Android updates and you want to have all of the same things that the other Nexuses have plus a little bit because it's a Nexus 5, well, then this is the phone for you. Buy it. The Nexus 5, when you don't consider the price, is great. The Nexus 5, when you do consider the price, is in a league of its own because there really isn't any other $350 phone with a Snapdragon 800 and the latest version of Android. There just isn't another phone like that for $350. So it's in a sort of a class of its own, which is why a lot of people have a hard time deciding what to compare it with. It inevitably gets compared with other $700 phones rather than other $350 phones. I think Google could decide to make a $700 Nexus and not make any compromises like the camera and the speaker, but right now, this is the Nexus 5 we have, and it's recommended for a certain group of people, and if you're considering buying it, you're probably in that group of people. You know who you are, and I wouldn't hesitate. I would just pick one out. Either way, this has been MKBHD. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video review of the Nexus 5, be sure to share it, and of course, there's a subscribe button below if you want to see more videos like this coming up very soon. Either way, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later. Peace.